Now we can try it and do it in a better way. So when you start at the beginning, or actually in this case we start at the end, because we would have to be dropping back and looking at each and every one of the teams that have participated in this tournament. Of course, we'll be doing this in the next few days. And we might even extend into after Copa America to talk a little bit about each and every one of the national teams. And one of the important things to be looking at when it comes to Colombia is that Reinaldo Rueda only had basically 3.5 weeks to get this entire team put together the way it was established, the way that it was being able to understand each and every one of the concepts that he wanted to have in place. And more importantly, he was capable of establishing a block of defense that was very solid, which is something commendable with the short period of time that he was allotted in order to do it. Of course, none of it really was his fault. None of it was anyone's fault for that matter. Of course, things didn't come out the way that it was expected with the pandemic, with World Cup qualifying play not being played in the month of March, and many other factors that came through in terms of the seasons, in terms of the calendar, that really didn't work out for Colombia in that particular manner. So when you look at it from that particular perspective, it's interesting to see the amount of work that he was capable of doing in such a short period of time. You do see that there's a team that can be worked with, that can be molded, that is being molded. So what's very important to look at is what this team was capable of doing in this tournament. There was no expectation of winning, although many would start saying, yeah, you know, Colombia could win the title. I mean, yeah, of course, as you got closer, and of course after beating Uruguay and seeing Argentina being a solid team, but not a team that would kill you off, you knew that there was a chance, and there was a chance as they took Argentina to penalties. So when you look at it from that perspective, yeah, there's a lot to truly gain from this tournament. There was a great deal to grow out of this tournament. And it's funny because in Colombia 3 weeks ago, when James Rodriguez was not called up to the Colombian national team, there was a very negative mindset about this team. Oh my God, we can't win without James. We can't do this without him. Now all of a sudden when you start saying, hey, we can do certain things without him. I'm not saying that he is a player that is expendable. I'm not saying that he's a player that is unnecessary. Yeah, if you have a player in James Rodriguez that comes in and is capable of playing at 100%, that is giving 100% and is committed to the cause, there's very few players that in the world that you'd want over him. When he's at 100%, I'm talking about. Now, when he's at 80, when he's at 70, when he's at below 70, I can think of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players that I would want. Not as skilled as him, but as more committed, I would want many more over him. That's the problem when you start finding these types of players and you start going into these types of situations where players like James don't necessarily seem to be committed to the cause. He's been, ever since 2014, he's been more worried about the social media aspect. He's been worried about the likes. He's been more worried about the social life, about that aspect of his life, of his celebrity than anything else. And that has been one of the issues that has bothered his career. And people can say whatever they want about it. I mean, he's a super talented player, but when you have an issue with one player, or excuse me, one coach, okay, fine, you can have it. Not everybody gets along with anyone. But then the second one comes in, and then the third one comes in, and then the fourth one comes in, and now you once again have Rafa Benitez as your coach. How much are you going to play? That's the big question that many have to start asking in terms of what the Colombian national team is going to be able to have in terms of a contribution of James Rodriguez going forward. Now, if he comes in each time, he doesn't play much at Everton, but when he comes to the national team, he gives 100%. Welcome aboard. Same thing with Juan Quintero, goes to China after leaving River Plate. What Juan Quintero are we going to find? No one knows. That's the big question mark in his career at this point. Is he's 28, almost 27, 28 at this stage. Another immense talent. Player that when he's been on and he's been pushed and he's been motivated by his coach, boy, he is phenomenal. Love him. But when he's not, what happens then? He's out of shape. He ends up worrying more about partying. He worries about other extracurricular things. We'll leave it at that. Okay? You see a Colombian team without those two players that have been able to find leadership elsewhere with Cuadrado. Maybe you start looking at David Ospina. Maybe you start looking in the middle with Wilmar Barrios too. In my humble opinion, if he wasn't the second best player for Colombia in this tournament, he was the first. You'd have to either him or Luis Diaz. Honestly, if you say Luis Diaz, I have no problem because he was phenomenal as well. But those two players, interchangeable depending on the moments, they were the respective men of the match on a consistent basis for Colombia throughout the entire tournament. You find a diamond in the rough, or not diamond in the rough, but you find a player that can contribute as well in Luis Diaz, you got to use him, man. He drove Argentina crazy down that far side, down that left side. You got to pay attention to him. You got to give him time. You got to give him an effort. Edwin Cardona, he's a wild card. Usually out of shape, can't give you 90 minutes, but when he's on the pitch and he's on, that right foot of his makes a difference. I mean, that right foot could be considered a lethal weapon. But that's the reality of what Colombian football is at this stage. Borré seems lost. He was thinking more about Eintracht Frankfurt. But if he comes back and if he's not benefited by the system, how will he be over in Germany compared to being in River Plate? Another big question mark. The Atalanta boys, Luis Muriel and Duvan Zapata, a bit underwhelming. But overall, all of those things that I'm mentioning, collectively, there's something to work with. And I believe strongly that can be the case. And I believe strongly that this team can do a lot of important things and they can be in the fight and they can make this fight for first place. I think Brazil pretty much has basically run away with it. At this stage, they think they only need maybe somewhere between 9-10 points in the next 12 matches to be able to qualify without having to go to a playoff in the World Cup. I think they're in. Argentina find themselves rather comfortable. Ecuador could find themselves rather comfortable. So if you really start breaking it down, it ends up being 4 teams vying for 2 spots. One of them being a playoff. So when we start looking at it from that perspective, that is what you end up looking at when it comes to Colombia. I really believe that there's a lot of potential with this team. I believe that there's something to work with. And I believe this team can be successful. Now, when it comes to defining what the term success means, I'll leave it to you. To me, it's trying to get as close to 2014 as possible, maybe even surpass it. Will they do it? I don't know. But they can get to that point. They have the potential to fight for spots to get to that stage. But it's a long process. They have a year and a half still to get it all together. But again, it depends on each and every one of the individual parts playing up to their maximized potential. And to me, that's one of the big keys for this Colombian side going into the future.